Here's a question that has been bothering me. Why do we remember World War II the way we do? Think about it. When someone mentions World War II, what pops into your head? Probably D-Day, right? Maybe Pearl Harbor, Hitler's speeches, Churchill with his cigar, the atomic bombs, big moments, dramatic moments, the kind of stuff that makes it into movies. But here's what nobody tells you. Those weren't actually the moments that decided the war. I know, that sounds crazy, but stick with me here. Because what I am about to share with you is going to completely change how you think about history, the real turning points of World War II. They happened in quiet rooms, in random conversations, through accidents, mistakes, and decisions made by people whose names you've never heard, people who had no idea they were changing the course of human history. Today, we're going to spend some time together exploring these moments, and I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to see World War II, and maybe history itself in a completely different way. We're going to talk about a janitor who accidentally became one of the most important spies in history. A weather report that saved or doomed millions, depending on how you look at it. A woman who lied about her age and ended up breaking codes that shortened the war by years. And a chocolate bar that became a weapon. Yeah, you heard that right. A chocolate bar. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into the World War II nobody talks about. Let's start with Juan Pugil Garcia. And I am going to be honest with you, this guy's story is so ridiculous that if you saw it in a movie, you'd say it was unrealistic. It's 1941. Juan is a Spanish guy living in Lisbon, Portugal. He's not a soldier. He's not a spy. He's basically just a regular dude who hates fascism. And he decides, completely on his own, that he wants to help the Allies win the war. So he goes to the British embassy and says, "Hey, I want to be a spy for you guys." The British look at this random Spanish guy with no training, no connections, no experience, and they say, "No thanks." They literally turn him away. They think he's either crazy or, worse, a German agent trying to infiltrate them. Now, most people would give up at this point, right? Maybe feel a bit embarrassed, go home, forget about the whole thing. Not Juan. This guy decides, okay, if Britain won't let me spy for them, I'll spy for Germany, and then Britain will want me. I'm not making this up. This is actually what he did. He goes to the Germans and tells them he's got connections in Britain. He travels there for business. He can be their spy. The Germans, for some reason, believe him. They give him spy training, invisible ink, a code name Arable, and money. They tell him to go to Britain and start sending intelligence reports. Here's the problem, Juan has never been to Britain. He doesn't know anyone there. He can't even get a visa to go there. So he goes to Lisbon instead and just starts making stuff up. He goes to the library and checks out travel guides to Britain. He buys British magazines. He studies maps. And then he starts sending fake intelligence reports to Germany, pretending he's in London, telling them all about British military movements and defenses. And the Germans believe him. They eat it up. They think he's amazing. But here's where it gets interesting. Juan is too good at making things up. His fake reports are so detailed and convincing that the British intelligence services start noticing them. They're intercepting German communications. And they keep seeing reports from this mysterious spy in London who doesn't exist. At first, they're worried. Who is this guy? Is there a German spy in London we don't know about? Then they realize, wait, none of this information is real. Whoever this spy is, he's not actually in Britain. He's making it all up. And that's when they have a brilliant idea. Let's find this guy and use him. They track down one in Lisbon, and this time, when he offers to work for Britain, they say yes. They bring him to London, give him the code name Garbo because he was such a great actor, and turn him into a double agent, now working with British intelligence. Juan creates an entire fictional spy network. He invents 27 fake sub-agents, each with their own personality, background, and quirks. There's a guy in Glasgow who's a bit lazy and often sends reports late. There's a Venezuelan living in Scotland who hates the cold. There's a widow in Brighton who's very reliable. None of these people exist. But one makes them so real that the Germans trust them completely. The Germans are paying him a fortune. They think he's running the best spy network they have in Britain. Meanwhile, every single piece of intelligence he sends them is either completely false or carefully crafted by British intelligence to mislead them. And here's the payoff. In the lead up to D-Day, Juan's fake spy network becomes crucial. They allies want the Germans to think the invasion is going to happen at Calais, not Normandy. So Juan sends reports confirming this. His fake agents spot fake army units. Remember the Ghost Army we'll talk about later. They report fake troop movements. They create an entire fictional reality. The Germans are so convinced that even after D-Day starts at Normandy, they keep huge numbers of troops at Calais for weeks, waiting for the real invasion that Juan's spies have told them is coming. This one guy, this random Spanish man who couldn't get a job as a spy, helped ensure the success of the largest military invasion in history. Think about that for a second. The fate of D-Day, the operation that involved 156,000 troops, 5,000 ships, and 11,000 planes partly depended on whether German commanders believed the fake intelligence reports from a guy in London who was making up stories about people who didn't exist. One Pugil Garcia received medals from both Britain and Germany. The Germans never found out he was lying to them. After the war, he faked his own death and moved to Venezuela, where he ran a bookshop and gift shop. He lived quietly until 1984, when a writer tracked him down and his story finally came out. The lesson here: sometimes the most important people in history are the ones who just absolutely refuse to take no for an answer. Juan wasn't special. He wasn't trained. He didn't have connections. He just had an idea and the stubbornness to make it happen, even when everyone told him no. Alright, let's talk about weather. I know weather sounds boring. But trust me on this one, because a weather report literally determined when D-Day would happen, and that timing changed everything. It's June 1944. The Allies have been planning the invasion of Normandy for years. They've assembled the largest invasion force in human history. Everything is ready. The date is set, June 5, 1944. There's just one problem: the weather. See, for the invasion to work, they need specific conditions. The seas can't be too rough, or the landing crafts will capsize. They need low tide so they can see the underwater obstacles the Germans have placed. They need enough moonlight for the paratroopers who'll be dropping behind enemy lines, and they need decent visibility so planes can provide air support. It's a very narrow window of conditions, and they only happen a few days each month. On June 4th, the day before the invasion is supposed to launch, Supreme Commander Eisenhower holds a meeting. Present are all the top military leaders, and one guy who most people have never heard of, Group Captain James Stagg, a meteorologist. Stagg looks at his weather charts and gives them bad news: a storm is coming. If they launch on June 5th as planned, they'll be sailing into terrible conditions. High waves, strong winds, low clouds. It could be a disaster. Now, imagine being Eisenhower in this moment. You've got 156,000 men ready to go, ships loaded with equipment, planes fueled and ready. Some troops are already on ships heading toward France. The entire operation has been set in motion, and this weather guy is telling you to stop everything. Oh, and there's another problem. You can't just postpone whenever you want. Those specific tidal and moon conditions they need. If they don't go now, the next window isn't for 2 weeks. That means 156,000 troops sitting on ships, waiting, while the Germans potentially figure out what's coming. Every day you wait is another day for security to break down, for someone to leak information, for the Germans to strengthen their defenses. Eisenhower asks Stagg, when will the weather improve? Stagg studies his charts. Remember, this is 1944. They don't have satellite imagery. They don't have computer models. Weather prediction is more art than science. Stagg is looking at reports from weather stations, studying patterns. making educated guesses, and he tells Eisenhower something that must have sounded insane. There will be a break in the weather on June 6. A window of maybe 36 hours before the storms return. Think about what he's saying. In the middle of a major storm system, there's going to be a brief calm period, and it's going to happen exactly when they need it. Eisenhower has to decide, does he believe this? Does he risk the entire operation on a weather prediction? He decides to postpone from June 5th to June 6th. And Stad was right. On June 6th, the weather cleared just enough. The seas were still rough, a lot of soldiers got seasick, and some landing craft did capsize, but it was manageable. The invasion went forward. Here's the crazy part. The Germans didn't think the Allies would attack in that weather field. Marshal Rommel, who was in charge of defending the Atlantic coast, actually went home to Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday. He looked at the weather and thought, no way they're invading in this. I've got time. Many German officers were away from their posts. When the invasion started, it took hours for them to even confirm it was happening, and more hours to get commanders to make decisions about how to respond. If the Allies had gone on June 5th as originally planned, we don't know what would have happened, but it probably wouldn't have been good. The weather was genuinely terrible. Landing craft might have been lost. Coordination between different units would have been much harder. Casualties could have been significantly higher if they'd waited for the next good weather window 2 weeks later. The Germans might have discovered the plan. The element of surprise would have been lost. The entire strategic situation could have changed. The success of D-Day, and remember, D-Day was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany in Western Europe, depended on a weather forecaster being right about a 36-hour window of decent weather in the middle of a storm. But here's what really gets me about this story. We remember Eisenhower's decision. We remember the brave soldiers who landed on those beaches. We remember the generals who planned the operation. But how many people have heard of James Stagg? The guy who made the prediction that the entire operation hinged on after the war. Stagg went back to being a meteorologist. He worked at Edinburgh University. He lived a quiet life. When he died in 1975, his obituary in most newspapers was just a few paragraphs, and yet, his weather report on June 4, 1944, might have been one of the most important pieces of information shared in the entire war. This is what I mean about history being made in unexpected ways. We focus on the dramatic stuff of battles, the speeches, the big moments. But the real turning points often happen in quiet rooms, with people making technical decisions that don't seem heroic but end up mattering more than anything else. Now let's talk about Mavis Beatty. And before I tell you her story, I want you to imagine what a World War II codebreaker looks like. You're probably picturing some brilliant older professor, right? Glasses, maybe. Years of experience in mathematics or linguistics. Someone who's been studying cryptography their whole career. Now let me tell you about Mavis. She was 19 years old. She had studied German at university for 1 year before dropping out because she ran out of money. She had exactly zero experience with cryptography or code breaking. And she ended up breaking one of the most important codes of the entire war. It's 1940. Britain is recruiting people to work at Bletchley Park, the secret facility where they're trying to break German codes. They put out vague job advertisements looking for people good at crosswords and puzzles. Mavis, who loves word games, applies. She goes for an interview, and they ask her strange questions. If you were in a lifeboat with someone who had information that could save lives but would only give it to you if you promised not to tell anyone else, what would you do? They're testing whether she can keep secrets. She gets the job. They tell her she'll be working on something important for the war effort but don't explain what. They make her sign the Official Secrets Act, which means she can't tell anyone, including her family, what she's doing. She shows up at Bletchley Park and discovers she'll be working on breaking Italian naval codes. Now, here's some context. The Germans had the famous Enigma machine, which everyone's heard of, but the Italians had their own encryption system. And in some ways, it was even more complex than Enigma. It was used by the Italian Navy to communicate with their ships and coordinate with the German Navy in the Mediterranean. Breaking it was crucial because Britain was fighting a naval war in the Mediterranean. If they could read Italian naval communications, they'd know where Italian ships were going, when they were planning attacks, what supplies they were moving. Navis starts working with a team, including a brilliant mathematician named Dilly Knox, who was the exact stereotype of an eccentric professor. He would think better lying under a tree outside. They're making some progress. But there's one version of the Italian naval code they can't crack. It's called the Hagelin machine, and it's considered unbreakable. Then, in 1941, Mavis is given an intercepted message to work on. It's a short message, and she notices something interesting. The message is time-stamped, and she realizes it must be a routine weather report, as ships send these at the same time every day. This gives her something called a crib in code-breaking terms, to guess what part of the message says. If she knows the message is probably talking about weather, and she knows the Italian words for things like wind, clouds, visibility, she can start testing possible settings on the machine. She works on it for days. Remember, this isn't like typing things into a computer. She's doing complex mathematical calculations by hand, testing different possibilities, trying to find patterns. And then, late one night, it clicks. She breaks the code. When she realizes what she's done, she runs to find Dilly Knox. He's already gone home for the night. She has to wait until morning to tell him, probably not sleeping much because she's so excited and nervous. Did she really break it? Could she be wrong? The next morning, Knox confirms it. She's broken the unbreakable Italian naval code. And the timing couldn't be more perfect. It's March 1941, and the British are about to fight the Battle of Cape Matapan against the Italian Navy in the Mediterranean. Thanks to Mavis's breakthrough, British intelligence can now read Italian naval communications. They know exactly where the Italian fleet is going. They know the Italians don't realize the British are nearby. They know the Italian ships think they're safe. The British fleet ambushes them. It's a crushing victory. 3 Italian heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers are sunk. Over 2,000 Italian sailors die, compared to just 3 British casualties. The Italian Navy is so damaged by this defeat that it never recovers. For the rest of the war, Italian ships barely venture out of port. This one battle changes the entire balance of power in the Mediterranean. It ensures that Britain can supply troops in North Africa. It affects the entire course of the war in that theater. And it happened because a 19-year-old who had dropped out of university after 1 year had a smart idea about a weather report. But Mavis's story doesn't end there. Later in the war, she breaks another Italian code system that reveals Germany's spy network in the Balkans. This leads to dozens of German spies being captured or turned into double agents. After the war ends, Mavis goes back to regular life. She gets married, has children, becomes a garden historian, which honestly sounds lovely. She can't tell anyone what she did during the war because everything about Bletchley Park is still classified. It is not until the 1990s, 50 years later, that the work done at Bletchley Park is finally declassified and people can talk about it. That's when the world learns that this quiet woman who wrote books about gardening had been one of the most important codebreakers of World War II. Mavis gave interviews later in life, and people would ask her, what was it like being a teenage girl doing this incredibly important work? And you know what she said? She didn't realize it was important at the time. She just thought it was an interesting puzzle. She'd go to work, try to break codes, go home, live her life. She had no idea that her breakthroughs were being immediately used to plan naval operations. They didn't tell her that the codes she broke were saving thousands of lives. She was just solving puzzles. Think about that. One of the most significant intelligence breakthroughs of the entire war was achieved by someone who thought she was just doing crossword puzzles for the government. This story reminds me that genius isn't always what we think it is. It's not always the oldest person in the room or the one with the most credentials. Sometimes it's a 19-year-old who looks at a problem differently because she doesn't know she is supposed to think about it in a certain way. And it reminds me that most people who do extraordinary things don't feel extraordinary while they're doing them. They're just showing up, doing their job, solving the puzzle in front of them. The significance only becomes clear later. Okay, now we need to talk about exploding chocolate. Yes, really. During World War II, both sides were constantly trying to assassinate each other's leaders. Hitler had multiple assassination attempts against him. The Allies wanted him dead. The Germans wanted Churchill dead. It was a whole thing, but here's the problem with assassinating someone. It's really hard. Think about it. These leaders are surrounded by bodyguards. They don't eat food that hasn't been checked. They don't open suspicious packages. They're paranoid, and rightfully so. So intelligence agencies had to get creative, and British intelligence got really creative. They developed something called Operation Chocolate. The idea was to create chocolate bars that looked completely normal but had plastic explosives hidden inside them. The chocolate coating would be real chocolate. The wrapper would look exactly like a normal German chocolate bar, but inside, hidden within the chocolate, would be a thin layer of high explosive. The plan was to get these chocolate bars into places where German officers would find them left on tables, dropped near military facilities, included in supply shipments. An officer would find this chocolate bar, think it was just a regular piece of chocolate, break off a piece to eat it, and boom. The British made sample chocolate bars and took photographs of them to show to soldiers and intelligence officers, so they'd know what to look for and wouldn't accidentally pick one up themselves. But here's the twist, they never actually deployed them. Why? Because someone realized that the psychological warfare value was greater than the actual assassination value. Think about it, if you're a German officer and you've been shown photographs of explosive chocolate bars, are you ever going to trust chocolate again? Every time you see a chocolate bar, you're going to wonder, is this one of them? Is this going to explode? The mere knowledge that exploding chocolate exists is enough to make people paranoid. You don't actually need to use it. Just let the rumor spread, show people what it looks like, and watch as everyone becomes suspicious of everything. This is psychological warfare at its finest. You're not trying to kill people directly. You're trying to make them afraid. You're trying to make them waste time and energy being paranoid. You're trying to make them trust nothing. And it worked. German officers became extremely cautious about anything they picked up. Time and resources were spent checking food supplies. People became suspicious of everyday objects. The British also developed exploding coal designed to blow up when thrown into a ship's furnace. Exploding rats, dead rats stuffed with explosives, meant to be thrown into boilers. And even explosive fountain pens. Again, most of these were never actually used in significant numbers, but the fear of them was incredibly effective. There is this amazing quote from one British intelligence officer who said that the best weapon is the one your enemy thinks you have, whether you actually have it or not. During the Cold War, this concept evolved into the idea of mutually assured destruction. Both sides had nuclear weapons. But the whole point was that neither side would use them because both sides knew the other side had them. The weapons were most effective when they weren't being used. But the chocolate bar thing has this extra layer that I love. It takes something completely innocent and makes it sinister. Chocolate is supposed to be a treat. It's supposed to be comforting. It's a little moment of pleasure during a terrible war. And now it might kill you. This is the kind of warfare that doesn't make it into the movies, right? We see the big battles, the dramatic moments. We don't see intelligence officers carefully crafting fake chocolate bars and taking photographs to distribute to troops. But this stuff mattered. It made officers paranoid. It slowed down decision-making. It created an atmosphere where nothing felt safe. And here's the really interesting part. After the war, chocolate companies actually had a problem because people were still nervous about chocolate. There were rumors that continued for years about chocolate that might be dangerous. Companies had to work to rebuild trust in their products. One weird decision to create exploding chocolate bars, which were barely ever used, created psychological ripples that lasted for years. So let's step back for a second. We've talked about a fake spy with an imaginary network, a weather forecaster, a teenage codebreaker, and exploding chocolate bars. What do all these stories have in common? They're all about leverage. They're all about moments where a small action had massive consequences. One Pugil Garcia, working alone with fake reports, influenced the deployment of German divisions. One man's lies moved tens of thousands of troops. James Stagg, making a weather prediction, determined when the largest invasion in history would happen. One report set the timing for an operation involving millions of people. Mavis Beatty, solving a puzzle, enabled a naval victory that changed the balance of power in an entire theater of war. One code broken led to thousands of lives saved or lost. The exploding chocolate, it created fear and paranoia that spread far beyond any actual chocolate bar. This is the butterfly effect in action. This is chaos theory playing out in real life. And here is what I think is so fascinating. None of these people knew the full impact of what they were doing at the time. One didn't know that German generals were making strategic decisions based on his fake spy reports. He was just in a room in London, writing letters. Stagg didn't know that his weather prediction would become one of the most consequential pieces of information in the war. He was just doing his job as a meteorologist. Mavis didn't know that the code she broke would lead to a major naval battle. She was just working on a puzzle. The people who designed the exploding chocolate never knew how the fear of it would spread and persist. They were all just doing what was in front of them, solving the immediate problem, making the decision they needed to make that day. And that's actually kind of profound, isn't it? Because we live our lives the same way. We make small decisions every day, and we have no idea which ones will matter. We do our jobs, we solve problems, we help people when we can. Most of it probably doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things, but some of it does. Some of our small actions have consequences we'll never see. That email you send might change someone's day, which changes their decision, which changes something else. That conversation you have might plant an idea that grows into something significant. That time you help a stranger might set off a chain of events you'll never hear about. World War II wasn't won by a few great leaders making brilliant decisions. I mean, sure, those decisions mattered. But the war was really won by millions of people making small choices, doing their jobs, solving their particular problems. The soldier who chose to keep fighting instead of surrendering. The factory worker who made sure every rivet was perfect. The clerk who filed the right report at the right time. The cook who kept people fed. The nurse who saved one more life. The engineer who fixed a broken radio so communications could continue. History is made of millions of small moments, and we only remember a few of them. So here's what I want you to take away from all this. First, history is weirder and more interesting than you think. The real stories are often stranger than anything Hollywood would make up. Fake spy networks with imaginary agents, exploding chocolate, a weather report that determined D-Day. You couldn't write this stuff. Second, the most important people in history are often the ones you've never heard of. For every famous general or politician, there were thousands of people doing crucial work that nobody noticed. Third, and this is the big one, you never know when what you're doing matters. Mavis Beatty thought she was just solving puzzles. One Pugil Garcia thought he was just writing creative fiction. James Stagg thought he was just reading weather charts. They were changing history. And maybe you are too. Maybe that thing you're working on right now that seems small, that seems unimportant, maybe it matters more than you think. Maybe helping that one person will set off a chain of events. Maybe doing your job well today will make a difference you'll never see. We tend to think that making a difference requires doing something big and dramatic, but the stories we've talked about today show us something else, most of the time. Making a difference just means showing up and doing what's in front of you as well as you can. Be the person who refuses to take no for an answer, like Juan. Be the person who makes the hard call based on your best judgment, like Stagg. Be the person who looks at problems from a fresh perspective, like Mavis. Be creative, like the people who invented psychological warfare with chocolate bars. And remember, the fact that you don't see your impact doesn't mean you're not having one. History isn't just made by the people in the history books, it's made by everyone, including you. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the weird, unexpected side of World War II, do me a favor and let me know in the comments, what other historical events should I cover like this? What other stories are hiding behind the famous moments we all know? And if you want more content like this long-form, detailed, looking at history from angles nobody talks about, consider subscribing. I put out videos like this regularly, and I think you'll enjoy the journey we're going on together. Thanks for sticking with me for this longer video. I know it was a lot, but these stories deserve to be told properly. They deserve to be more than just footnotes. Until next time, remember, you're making history right now, you just don't know it yet.